Imagine if you had to gather all your food from the wild every single day. No grocery stores, no farms, no gardens, just you, nature, and whatever you could find or hunt. This was reality for our ancestors just 12,000 years ago. But then something incredible happened that changed the course of human history forever. The development of agriculture didn't just give us food security, it created civilization as we know it. Today we're going to explore how humans went from wandering hunters and gatherers to master farmers. We'll discover which plants were the first to be domesticated and how this process shaped entire continents. We'll also look at how ancient people managed to transform wild, barely edible plants into the crops that feed billions today. This story involves detective work, genetic mysteries, and some truly amazing plant transformations. By the end of this video, you'll never look at your dinner the same way again. So let's dig into the fascinating world of agricultural history and plant domestication. Agriculture didn't happen overnight, it was a gradual process that took thousands of years. Around 12,000 years ago, the last ice age was ending and the climate was becoming more stable. This created perfect conditions for humans to start experimenting with growing their own food. But here's what's really interesting, agriculture developed independently in at least 7 different places around the world. These areas are called centers of origin, and each one gave us different crops that we still rely on today. Let's start with the Fertile Crescent, which includes parts of modern-day Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Iran. This region is often called the cradle of agriculture because it's where farming first began around 11,000 years ago. The people here were the first to domesticate wheat, barley, lentils, peas, chickpeas, and flax. They also domesticated animals like sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs around the same time. What made wheat so special was that early farmers noticed some plants had seeds that stayed on the stem longer. Normally, wild wheat seeds would fall to the ground immediately when ripe. This is called shattering. But mutant plants with seeds that stayed attached were much easier to harvest. Over hundreds of generations, farmers kept selecting these non-shattering plants. They were essentially doing genetic engineering without knowing it. Eventually, these wheat plants became completely dependent on humans for survival. This is the key to domestication, when plants or animals need human care to reproduce successfully. Moving to East Asia, rice was first domesticated in China around 9,000 years ago. The process was quite different from wheat because rice grows in flooded fields called paddies. Early Chinese farmers had to master complex water management systems to grow rice successfully. They also domesticated soybeans, millet, and tea in this region. Meanwhile, people in New Guinea were domesticating bananas and sugarcane around the same time. In the Americas, agriculture developed independently in several locations. Mexico gave us some of the most important crops in human history: corn, beans, and squash. These 3 plants were called the Three Sisters because they grew so well together. Corn provided a natural pole for beans to climb, beans added nitrogen to the soil, and squash covered the ground to retain moisture. The transformation of corn from its wild ancestor called teosinte is one of the most dramatic examples of domestication. Teosinte looks nothing like modern corn, it has tiny seeds and only about 5 kernels per plant. Through thousands of years of careful selection, Mexican farmers turned this weedy grass into the corn we know today. Each ear now has hundreds of large, plump kernels arranged in neat rows. The genetic changes required for this transformation are so extensive that corn cannot survive without human help. In South America, people domesticated potatoes high in the Andes Mountains around 8,000 years ago. They also gave us tomatoes, quinoa, and cacao, the plant that gives us chocolate. The potato domestication story is particularly fascinating because there are actually thousands of different potato varieties. Andean farmers developed potatoes that could grow at different altitudes and in various climates. Some varieties could even survive freezing temperatures. Sub-Saharan Africa contributed important crops like yams, African rice, sorghum, and coffee. Ethiopian farmers were the first to cultivate coffee around 1,000 years ago. They noticed that goats became energetic after eating certain berries and decided to try them. The rest, as they say, is history. Eastern North America also had its own agricultural revolution with crops like sunflowers, squash, and various seed plants. However, this region didn't have large seeded grasses like wheat or rice, which limited agricultural development. Now let's talk about how domestication actually works at the genetic level. When humans select plants with desirable traits, they're changing the plant's DNA over time. Scientists can now study ancient plant remains and trace these genetic changes. One of the most important changes is the loss of seed dispersal mechanisms. Wild plants need their seeds to spread far and wide to find new places to grow. But farmers want seeds that stay put until harvest time. Another major change is synchronous ripening, having all the seeds ripen at the same time. This makes harvesting much more efficient than dealing with plants that ripen gradually. Many domesticated plants also develop larger seeds or fruits than their wild relatives. This happened because farmers consistently chose the plants with the biggest, most nutritious parts. Over time, plants also lost many of their natural defenses like bitter taste or tough outer shells. Wild plants need these defenses to avoid being eaten, but domesticated plants have human protection. The process of domestication created what scientists call the domestication syndrome. This refers to the collection of traits that most domesticated plants share. These include larger seeds, non-shattering seed heads, synchronous ripening, and reduced dormancy. Interestingly, many of these changes happened relatively quickly in evolutionary terms. Some plants showed signs of domestication within just a few hundred years of cultivation. The development of agriculture had profound effects on human society. First, it allowed people to produce surplus food, which meant not everyone had to spend their time finding food. This freed up people to become craftsmen, priests, rulers, and soldiers. It also led to the development of permanent settlements since people needed to stay near their crops. These settlements eventually grew into villages, towns, and cities. Agriculture also led to population growth because more reliable food sources could support more people. However, early farmers actually had worse nutrition than hunter-gatherers in many cases. They relied heavily on just a few staple crops, which created nutritional deficiencies. Archaeological evidence shows that early farmers were shorter and had more health problems than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. But the trade-off was worth it because agriculture could support much larger populations. The spread of agriculture from these centers of origin was often gradual. Sometimes farming spread through cultural diffusion, people learned techniques from their neighbors. Other times, agricultural societies expanded their territory, bringing their crops and animals with them. The spread of agriculture also led to the development of trade networks. Different regions specialized in different crops and traded with each other. This is how crops from one region eventually spread around the world.